So I binge watched the Netflix quarterback documentary series, and I was really impressed. This is one of the best documentaries that I've watched in all of my lifetime, and I'm not really a big documentary person. But this was a football documentary covering quarterbacks. So, of course, I was going to end up watching this thing. And I even bought a Netflix subscription to do so. And watching this documentary series really gave me the answer to one of my biggest questions, which has been, what really separates the elite quarterbacks from the average quarterbacks, and the average quarterbacks from the really bad quarterbacks? And I feel like the 3 QBs that they picked to follow for this series were absolutely perfect. You got Patrick Mahomes, who is the best quarterback in the league, right? And by the way, he takes Kansas City to the Super Bowl in this documentary because it was taking place last year. So that was a huge get for Peyton Manning and Omaha Productions and the NFL media who helped produce this, because what are the odds that one of the QBs you pick ends up going to the postseason? And then you got Kirk Cousins, who, although he isn't as good as Patrick Mahomes, he's a pretty solid quarterback. So then he takes Minnesota to the playoffs, and then you got Marcus Mariota, who gets benched, and the Falcons weren't even all that good last year. And then you got the drama with, did he quit on the Falcons? Now, when I look at Patrick Mahomes throughout this whole entire documentary, what stands out to me is that he's just that dude, man. Literally, this dude, the way he trains, the way he watches film is just so different from the other 2 quarterbacks in this documentary series. You see, Kirk Cousins, when he watches film, it's like he watches it, but when you compare it to how he watches and talks about film and what he's seeing, Patrick Mahomes has this dumbed down to the point where he's looking at how defensive linemen position themselves, how they react to the snap, the give off tells if they're blitzing or if they're dropping back in coverage. This is one of the things that I feel is really important to being successful, not only as a football player, but as a coach as well. You have to be able to pay attention to the small details, because the small details add up. And Patrick Mahomes, not only does he pay attention to the small details when it comes to watching film, but also in his preparation and his training. He trains his body to be able to handle getting tackled and bent awkwardly. And he also trains his body to make all those crazy off-platform throws. It's dumbed down to the point that his trainer has a certain way that, they do stretches that help the body build resiliency to being bent awkwardly. Like, Patrick Mahomes is just one of those dudes that just understands what it takes to be a phenomenal football player. And I think the biggest takeaway that I got from this is that elite quarterbacks, when the game is on the line, they always find a way to win 95% of the time. There's not too many times guys like Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow come up short. Because you want to know why? Every time they need to make a big play to put their team in position to win, they come through. They're the most reliable. Meanwhile, you got Kirk Cousins. He came through a good amount of times last year for the Minnesota Vikings, but in the biggest game of the season, in the playoffs, he wasn't able to get the job done. And then you got Marcus Mariota, who, unlike Patrick Mahomes and Kirk Cousins, I don't think he ever came through for the Atlanta Falcons last season. As a matter of fact, every time Marcus Mariota had the ball in his hands late in games, he was a liability. He had a fumble in one game, and then he threw 2 game-sealing interceptions throughout the season. They nearly would have lost to Seattle if it wasn't for the defense bailing them out in that game. So for Marcus Mariota, I was able to obviously tell what separates some of the worst quarterbacks in the game from even the Kirk Cousins of the world. Because at least the Kirk Cousins of the world, if you give them an ideal situation, they're going to be able to win a few primetime games for you, but they're also going to win the games for you that come close against teams that maybe you shouldn't be down against, or maybe if you're going against a good team but it's not in prime time, they may be able to get you a couple of comeback wins as well. But the elite QBs like Patrick Mahomes, when the lights are the brightest, that's where they're at their best. And then you look at Marcus Mariota, it's kind of like the Falcons were better off trying to find ways to win close games without needing the ball to be in his hands. And then you look at the situation with how he handled getting benched. It was really awkward to me. And honestly, you really don't know who's lying, because somebody's lying, nobody's telling the truth. So apparently, for the last couple of games of the season, the Falcons wanted to see what they had in Desmond Ridder. So apparently, Arthur Smith, he ends up taking Marcus Mariota to the office one day throughout that week. And then, they were supposed to have a discussion about Marcus Mariota's future as far as him being the starter for this season. So, according to Arthur Smith, the way this conversation went, hey, Marcus, we're going in a different direction. We're going with the future. And Desmond Ridder, we want to see what we have in him for these last final games. We don't have a shot at the playoffs, so we might as well throw him out there. But, however, we still would like you to be the backup. Now, Arthur Smith didn't tell us that directly, that he told Marcus Mariota that he was going to be the backup behind Desmond Ridder for the rest of the season. Because according from Marcus Mariota's perspective, him and Arthur Smith, when they sat down, they discussed, the future and Desmond Ridder starting out for the remainder of this season to see what they have in him. But he also talked about how he had an injury wrong with his knee, or something going on with his knee, and he had to get some surgery for it. Now, apparently, Arthur Smith, when he gets wind of this and why Marcus Mariota isn't at the facilities, he's shocked, because he's like, man, I ain't know nothing about no injury, so who do you guys think is lying? Do you think that Arthur Smith is telling the truth, or do you think that Marcus Mariota is telling the truth? Because in the documentary, they did show him getting surgery. So it's not like he was lying. Maybe he didn't tell Arthur Smith about it, but he did get surgery. Now, was this a surgery that maybe he could have gotten done after the season? Maybe. But even then, it's like, if you're in Marcus Mariota's situation, like, if you got an injury and it's hindering you and it's hurting you, like, why wait to the end of the season to get it addressed when you can just go ahead and get it addressed now and miss the rest of the year? You're the backup. You're going with the rookie. You want to see what you have in him. I'm a veteran. Why am I still on the team? Why am I still, practicing through an injury that's hurting me just to be the backup? Like, I kind of see where Marcus Mariota is coming from, but at the same time, people are going to go with the whole character thing. Oh, it's just good character. Even if Marcus Mariota had to get surgery, he probably should have waited towards the end of the season or after the year is over to get that surgery and helped out and be a backup and a good mentor to Desmond Ridder. And listen, like, that makes sense from a fan perspective, but a lot of us got to stop acting like we always operate off high moral ethical codes. The NFL is a business, and at the same time, these players got lives too. He just had a kid at that time too, so it kind of did make a lot of sense for him to just ring it in on the season, be around his daughter. Like, I kind of understand that. I mean, is it the right thing, from a football fan perspective? No. You probably don't agree with it, but I think we at least have to understand where he was coming from. And I'm pretty sure a lot of y'all probably, if you was in Marcus Mariota's situation, would have did the same thing. And that's the point that I'm trying to emphasize. Like, a lot of people on social media be acting like they just have this high moral code. It's the same thing when it comes to these player contract situations. Oh, man, he's being greedy. Knowing doggone well, if you was in that same situation, most of you guys, 95% of you guys, would be doing the same thing and acting out in the same way that these players do to get paid. You want to know why? Because it works. So when you look at Marcus Mariota, if you are in his shoes, you probably would have did the same thing. Now, from a fan perspective, you probably can say, yeah, like he quit on the team, but I kind of feel like you got to understand where he was coming from too at that time. You don't got to agree with it, but at least try to understand from the perspective. So you look at Kirk Cousins, you know, I came away after this documentary really liking Kirk Cousins. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Kirk Cousins is what people like to call a minimalist. They don't need much to survive. They can survive as long as they have the necessities. Like Kirk Cousins, this dude is all football. He's all football to the point that he doesn't care to waste time in picking out his outfits to the games and what to wear. He lets his wife do that so he can use that time to dedicate towards studying film or training. And Kirk Cousins is one of those guys that even though he gets paid millions of dollars a year, he doesn't really go crazy with his purchases, really. He is a pretty minimalistic guy who still shops at Walmart, Old Navy, JCPenney, Sam's Club. Like, he's somebody that doesn't really care about all those flashy things. I guess that's why the whole thing with the chains on, you know, kind of goes hella viral every time it's posted on social media, because that's not really Kirk Cousins' nature for real, to be, you know, be flaunty, be flashy. He's a guy that's, you know, minimalistic. As long as he has what's necessary, he's good. He doesn't really care for all that other big stuff. And another thing about Kirk Cousins is that this dude is really tough. After watching this, I was looking at the Minnesota Vikings offensive line. I was like, bruh, like y'all damn near got Kirk Cousins killed. Like against the Washington Commanders, he got smashed to the ground by somebody. And you're going to have the player that smashed Kirk Cousins from the Commanders going to pat him on the side of the back, talking about some, man, you all right, man? It's like,
come on now, dog. Come on, man.
Don't do that, man, like that, man. You know you hurt that dude. And then he had like these big scars, well, like bruises on the side of his stomach. It was just like, golly. Trying to get through an NFL season without getting injured is nearly impossible. That's why I kind of tell people now, good coaches can win in spite of injuries. Now, they may not be able to overcome injuries to all their star players, but as long as they have some of their core players, they should still be able to win, because if you're in the playoffs, nearly everybody's injured. Even if it isn't on the injury report, somebody is dealing with something, rather if it's bruises or just, you know, the overall wear and tear that comes with a football season. Like, high school football is a grind. I mean, just going through the off-season workout program in high school, even I was having days when I was sore. And the high school football seasons are like 9-10 weeks at most in Florida. So imagine a full 17-game regular season. Like, these guys get worn down, and people just think about, you know, how these players feel after the game. And after 1 week, no, like, these hits legitimately do add up week after week after week. And you can see that with Kirk Cousins and just what he was going through. And a lot of the stuff he was going through wasn't even listed on the injury report. And then you look at Kirk Cousins, right? Well, Kirk Cousins, this was also somebody who had to sacrifice his body pretty much. Like, Kirk Cousins could have very well had taken a couple of games off and said, you know what, I can't play through this injury. Now, you look at Patrick Mahomes, he kind of did the same thing. Patrick Mahomes damn near had no ankle when it ended up getting injured during the divisional round playoff matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And yet, Mahomes, he's arguing with Andy Reid to not go get the x-ray like a lunatic. It's like, bro, like, you really don't even know if your ankle is even completely broken, fam. Like, you just worried about getting some tape and getting back out there. Like, go get an x-ray, fam. Like, I understand the competitive nature of the NFL and you want to win, But Jesus, man, like, at least care a little bit about your health. So Patrick Mahomes ends up getting incredibly mad because he has to go get an x-ray. Like, you ever play football and you had a teammate that got really mad and he just took his helmet off and just threw it on the sideline? And then you always had that one coach that ended up yelling at him saying, hey boy, you better go pick up that helmet. You throw that helmet again, you better keep it on the ground and go turn those pads in. So this man, Patrick Mahomes, was incredibly frustrated because he had to go get an x-ray, and you know he was going to be right back on the field. And that's what I was saying with these elite quarterbacks. They always find a way to come through despite all odds. So Patrick Mahomes, I find it ironic that this dude is operating on pretty much one leg, because if you have a dead ankle, like, it's kind of nearly impossible to move with the other leg. But despite that, he's still making plays and making throws and putting Kansas City in a position to ultimately win the game. You know, he had an injury that was bad to the point where he probably shouldn't have been back out there. And then you look at what he did the following week in the AFC Conference Championship game. It's like this dude always found the way to dig deep. Every time the game was on the line, nobody cared about his ankle. All he cared about was making the play. Rather, if he had to run for 10 plus yards to get the first down in a crucial moment of the game. Like, it was one game where his ankle is still badly injured and he still finds a way to convert a 3rd and long with his legs. I'm like, bro, what is wrong with you, Patrick Mahomes? Like, what are you made of? And then even then, a little interesting side note, he has something a little bit different with his spine that allows him to do all these no-look passes. Like, I forgot what it is per se, what is with his spine development that allows him to be able to make all these crazy throws and, you know, these no-look passes. So apparently, like, the way his spine is built, like, he can still kind of, like, turn his head a little bit to the point where his peripheral vision is so strong he can still see a good amount of the other side of the field. Like, I don't know if it's worded exactly like that, but I know it's something like that. I just know it's something ridiculous. And this man, Patrick Mahomes, he's like a meta-human. Every time he needs to get a big play, he gets it, even in the Super Bowl. And even then, he was on the sideline giving credit to Jalen Hurts. Like, this man, Patrick Mahomes, one thing about him, like, he understands when he's going to be in a situation where he has to prepare himself to make a big play. He's already mentally ready to come to the understanding that this is a game that's going to be won in his hands. Other quarterbacks, when they get in tough situations like Kirk Cousins and Marcus Mariota, like, they don't look as enthusiastic to go out there and go win the game, especially Marcus Mariota. Like, every time a moment got big for him, it's like his eyes got big and he got clumsy. Extremely clumsy, even to the point where he ended up fumbling the ball on a read option at the end of one game. Like, everybody knows who played football from a Pop Warner level, the coaches tell you that if you're running the read option, you got to make sure that if that defensive end crashes down, that you know what you're doing with the football. You cannot be completely indecisive with the read option because it's a fast moving play. You're making one read, defensive end, contain, you hand it off. He crashes down, you keep it. And for Marcus Mariota, you know, he was indecisive with that. And he was indecisive pretty often. You know, Patrick Mahomes, one thing about him, he's not indecisive. He always knows where to go in most situations. He always has several options. And if he doesn't have anything, he's going to create something out of nothing. Kirk Cousins, he couldn't really create anything out of nothing. It's like he just needs a given situation to execute. And even sometimes, like, he can get a little bit in his head where I think he can kind of lose confidence in himself. And Marcus Mariota, like, man, I see why he's now a backup with the Philadelphia Eagles. And, you know, I think he's a solid quarterback. I don't think he's necessarily like a guy who, if he comes in, like, you can't win with at all. But as far as being your long-term starter throughout the course of a season, it's just like, if you're a team that doesn't have to win a lot of close games and you can win every game without a lot of difficulty, then you can probably be successful with the Marcus Mariota. But that's unrealistic because most games in the NFL are pretty close. So my overall takeaways and thoughts and reactions to the quarterback is that this was a very incredible documentary series. Well done. I love the camera angles, how it pretty much was like you was right in the action with the quarterbacks. Even one play when Patrick Mahomes was in the red zone, they really gave us like a very great camera view. It's like you literally could see the game up close. It's like you were standing there and you just see him going through his progressions. And one thing about it is that the NFL game moves really fast. Really fast. So it's like you don't really have any margin for error to not know what you're going to do. You got to have a lot of confidence when you're going through your progressions. And you don't really have time to second guess yourself, because if you second guess yourself like Marcus Mariota, you make mistakes. It's like even if you don't really know where you want to go, you still have to figure out a way to make the play be successful. And Patrick Mahomes does a very great job at that. And Kirk Cousins isn't really somebody that's a creator. And then when you look at the leadership qualities, I don't really feel like Marcus Mariota is a bad leader, but I don't think he's somebody that is going to galvanize the troops. Just keeping it 100. Like if Marcus Mariota was my quarterback, I would not be motivated based off his pregame speeches. I just feel like he's somebody that's a solid, quiet leader who leads by example. I don't really feel like he's going to be somebody that elevates you. Now, Kirk Cousins, I think he's a pretty solid leader, but I kind of feel the same way I do about him like I do Marcus Mariota in terms of a leadership standpoint. It's like the teammates like Marcus Mariota and Kirk Cousins, but it's kind of like they're not guys that are going to energize you. Now, you look at Patrick Mahomes, and I do think that Patrick Mahomes has a little bit of an advantage in terms of leadership over Kirk Cousins and Marcus Mariota, given from the fact that he already has the reputation being one of the best quarterbacks of our time, basically. Being that dude who you always know is going to come through for you the majority of the times. It's like, if he tells you something, like, you're going to have the utmost confidence to believe it because it's Patrick Mahomes. I just feel like it's a different belief when you got a Patrick Mahomes or a Joe Burrow or even a Tom Brady back there. You just have a different level of confidence, and it just makes you play so much better. It's like, any wide receiver that plays for Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, or played with Tom Brady, they make it seem like they will run through a brick wall for those guys. Like they will lay their bodies on the line to make plays for those quarterbacks. And meanwhile, you look at a Kirk Cousins, it's like he's cool, the locker room likes him, but he's not somebody that if he comes up to you is going to get you amped up and got you back believing in yourself. And even Kirk Cousins, it's like the thing with Kirk Cousins is like he's one of those players when he ends up making a mistake, it kind of takes him a little bit of time to get over it. You just can't come up to him and be like, oh man, it's straight, you got it, because he'll snap on you. Leave me alone, man. Like he's one of those people, like you just can't even come up to him and give him no reassurance. You just got to give him his space. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's the nature of an NFL team. Not every player has the same personality. That's part of being a great head coach. You have to understand the personality of your players and how to react to how they respond to certain situations so you can get them able to play at a higher level. And that's what good player coaches are able to do, like Mike Tomlin. And you look at Kevin O'Connell, I think that's kind of a little bit of an underrated thing with him. Like, we think about how good he is with the X's and O's on offense, but I think he does a pretty good job at understanding his players and how to give them space and the guys that he needs to get up in their face, to get them going, to get them playing at their best levels. And with Kirk Cousins, he realizes that, you know, he needs a guy who, when things go wrong, he needs some space. He needs to cool off. And in tough situations, Kirk Cousins kind of prevailed surprisingly against the Indianapolis Colts. Like, I didn't think they was going to be able to come back, judging from this documentary, just from how Kirk Cousins was responding. He's like, I'm aggravated, I'm agitated, like almost sounded like he damn near was done with the game. And you look at Marcus Mariota, like, it doesn't really seem like he be thrilled for those big moments. It just be like, okay, like, here it goes. Whatever happens, happens. And then you got Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is like, he already know what time it is. Like, against the LA Chargers, he was like, let's go offense. Like, we're going to have to score. He already knew that the game was going to come down to him being able to lead the team down the field. It's like he embraced the big moments. And one thing that you always hear about some of the greatest athletes of all time, not just the NFL players, but in the NBA and the MLB, they always were excited and they lived for the big opportunities to get the game-winning home run or to get the game-winning basket. And meanwhile, you got guys like Marcus Mariota, it's kind of like, it's like, he don't really be up. He don't really be energized for the big moments. Meanwhile, you got Patrick Mahomes. He's like, let's go. Let's get ready. Let's get this thing moving. So when you look at their personal lives, I feel like all these quarterbacks put in about the same amount of time when it comes to watching film, at least judging from this documentary. Now, I would have loved if they would have given us, some descriptions about what time it was, what day of the week it was, so you can get a better understanding of when they do certain activities or when they decide to watch film. But it seems like all these quarterbacks put in a good amount of time watching film. Now, when you look at Patrick Mahomes, I think that Patrick Mahomes probably had about at least as amount of time as Kirk Cousins and Marcus Mariota did to be able to have the same amount of preparation time as those guys had, because he had more responsibilities off the field, not just with his kids, but also with the fact that, he's the face of the league pretty much. So he has to do endorsement shoots. He's also having to attend parties. It's like Patrick Mahomes always has something going on with his life. It's like he comes home, he trains, he watches film, and in between all that, he still has like something social to do throughout the day. And even his family said that during the football season, they don't even get a lot of chances to spend time with them. So when they do, it's kind of rare. So Patrick Mahomes is just one of those guys that's just locked in. Now, Kirk Cousins, he's locked in too. Like I mentioned earlier, this is somebody who said that he doesn't really care about dressing up for real. He lets his wife do that so he can put that time into football. And Marcus Mariota, he's pretty all football. One thing about Marcus Mariota is that I don't think he went into a game where he wasn't really prepared. Like, I always feel like he was pretty prepared. I feel like he put in a good amount of time of film study, but I think that goes to the biggest overall theme that I started off this segment with, right? I told you guys when I started this that there's a difference between elite quarterbacks, okay, solid quarterbacks, and bad QBs. And it isn't preparation all the time. For guys like Patrick Mahomes, you say, oh, he just puts in more time than the other quarterbacks. Like, all these quarterbacks put in effort. All these quarterbacks are putting in hell of hours of film study, training. Like, if you're not putting in the time, honestly, you're most likely not even going to be successful as a low-end starter in the league. It's like everybody, I think, is putting on a good amount of, time when it comes to film study and preparedness and training. Now, you do have some guys that just slack off, but that may just be a maturity thing. But it seems like to me, if you don't even put in just like 2-3 hours of watching film or any training, you're not going to be able to even make a roster. So I think with Patrick Mahomes, what really separates him wasn't, how he watches film, even though he has like the little small things that he picks up when he's dissecting film and breaking down defenses, trying to study for tendencies. I feel like everybody has their different ways of watching film and the different things they look at to better understand what the defense is throwing at them. But I feel like for Patrick Mahomes, though, what really separates him It's the fact that he's just so much talented and so superior talent-wise to Kirk Cousins and Marcus Mariota. And honestly, when you think about some of the best quarterbacks in the league right now, like, they always have something, a trait that stands out that just makes them so better than their peers. Lamar Jackson, what stands out about him? The fact that he's a pretty solid passer, but he's probably the most athletically gifted quarterback to ever be in the NFL. It's just so difficult to be able to game plan for that. Justin Herbert, this is somebody that's a statue in the pocket. He's just hard to bring down. He's like Superman back there, and he can just make these incredible throws with hella arm strength and velocity despite defenders caving in on him. And Joe Burrow, just how cerebral he is. Patrick Mahomes gave a lot of respect to Joe Burrow, and as he should. Like, he knows that Joe Burrow is like his apparent tier. And even Jalen Hurts, like, he had a lot of respect for what Jalen Hurts did in the Super Bowl. So you look at Mahomes, he's just so ahead of, the other two QBs in this documentary series. He's just so more talented. And when you're so talented like he is, you can get away with certain things. Like that play that he made to the Clyde Edwards-Helaire on the back of the end zone. Like, Kirk Cousins and Marcus Mariota would never be able to do that. Most of the stuff that Mahomes did in these late game situations, Kirk Cousins and Marcus Mariota could not be able to physically pull off. Sometimes these quarterbacks just aren't talented enough to be able to get to the level of a Patrick Mahomes. You at least have to be very elite at something to become the top at your position in the NFL. Even if you're undersized, like you're a Drew Brees. Even though Drew Brees wasn't as physically gifted as some of the other QBs he came into the league with, you know what separated him? He's one of the most accurate quarterbacks to ever throw the football. He had elite accuracy. He had elite understanding of defenses. Peyton Manning, he was an elite thrower of the football. He had a great arm, elite IQ, and elite accuracy and really good pocket awareness. Tom Brady was elite when it came to his pocket mobility and his poise. It's like the elite QBs have certain overall skills that just gives them the advantage over some of the average or solid QBs. Like the guys like Jimmy G, Derek Carr, Ryan Tannehill. Those guys, they don't really have anything that they do that really stands out. They don't really have a signature trait. When you ask somebody about Patrick Mahomes, you ask somebody, what's something that stands out to you about Patrick Mahomes? They're going to be like either his arm strength or his ability to improvise and make throws from crazy body positions. Lamar Jackson, somebody's going to say his athleticism. Like any elite quarterback, when you ask them what is the trait that stands out to them, they're going to tell you something. Meanwhile, you ask somebody, man, what stands out to you about Derek Carr? People going to laugh at you, man. Like, they're going to be like, what you mean what stands out to me about Derek Carr? I mean, like, he's a solid QB. That's exactly what people are going to tell you. He's just a solid QB. You feel me? And y'all let me know if I'm wrong, but let me ask y'all in the chat. What do you feel stands out the most about Jimmy Garoppolo? And you know what you guys are going to tell me? Nothing. He's just a solid quarterback. Same thing with some of these other QBs. It's just like with Daniel Jones. What stands out to you about Daniel Jones? Oh, well, he's a really good runner. He's a solid runner. Okay, but it's like, does that really, really stand out to you? What really makes Daniel Jones a top-level QB? It's like, when you look at Patrick Mahomes compared to Mariota and Cousins, it's just like he's just a man amongst boys. And Kirk Cousins, though, he's really talented too, and so is Marcus Mariota. It's just that Patrick Mahomes just knows how to execute. That's really it. Marcus Mariota wasn't able to execute on the level of Kirk Cousins or even Patrick Mahomes. Even though, you probably want to say Kirk Cousins' level is something that would be a little bit more fair to compare Marcus Mariota to. But it's like Marcus Mariota isn't even on Kirk Cousins tier, which is why I still have a lot of respect for guys like Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr and Dak Prescott, because even though they're not elite quarterbacks, they are still really good QBs. You can win a Super Bowl with the Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins, say what you want to in primetime games, but in all of the biggest moments for the Minnesota Vikings, he came through nearly every single time, unless they got blown out. So you can win with a Kirk Cousins if you give him the right situation. Now, he can't create. He's not really going to be good in chaos, but you got a tough quarterback that's a fighter, man. And Patrick Mahomes, he's just a complete package. Now, Marcus Mariota is like, he has the really good physical attributes, the speed, pretty decent arm. But it's like, other than that, what really stands out about him? And was he able to execute in the big moments for the Falcons? He wasn't. So Marcus Mariota, his inability to execute in crunch time, he was a little clumsy. Marcus Mariota, I now understand why he's no longer a starting quarterback in the NFL. And I know it's a little harsh, but just watching this documentary series, it's not like he didn't put in the time, but he just wasn't somebody who could just get it done when it mattered. And too many times he costed the team wins. Turnovers are really important. One thing about great quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, he can make a mistake and he's able to come back and overcome it. Meanwhile, somebody like Marcus Mariota, not only does he make mistakes, but he makes them in the worst moments of the game. So these are my thoughts and my reactions to the Netflix quarterback docu-series. Let me know what you guys think about it down in the comment section down below. This segment went a lot longer than what I expected, man. We've been talking about this thing for like 40 minutes.